What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099. Welcome to day 4 of my 365-day graphic novel review challenge project. Today, keeping with my theme for this first week of doing characters from the Justice Society and in the realm of DC's Earth 2, I want to talk to you about Starman, Sins of the Father. This collects issues 1 through 5 and issue 0 of the James Robinson, Tony Harris Starman series. And this was one of the spin-offs from Zero Hour. And it is by far the most well-remembered, well-loved of the spin-offs from Zero Hour. I would say the other one would be the Legion of Superheroes reboot, which has kind of, I guess, gotten less favorable over the years since Legion has now been rebooted twice since that reboot. But you also had, like, the new, edgy Dr. Fate, who didn't look anything like the old Dr. Fate. You had Primal Force, which I don't even think lasted 6 issues. You had a new and improved Hawkman, which was just 1,000 times more complicated and confusing than Hawkman had been before that. And then you had Starman. And this series is often touted as being one of the best comics of the 1990s. And I had read this volume many years ago, and then I would hear people talk about how amazing Starman was, and I thought, really? It was okay, but I didn't think that it was like one of the best comics of the 90s. I was kind of confused about why people were talking this series so much. And then I reread this volume for this review, and I can kind of see why people were saying that this was one of the best series of the 90s. First of all, it was the 1990s. There wasn't a whole lot of good comic stuff coming out of the 1990s. You look at early Image comics from the 90s, and that was kind of the norm for the 1990s. Sure, that wasn't all that you had from Marvel and DC and every company coming out in the 1990s. There was other stuff, but 90% of what was being put out in the 90s was stuff that wasn't very good. Not very good art, definitely not very good writing, just all across the board. The content was not great in that decade. So in the mid-90s, this series was head and shoulders above everyone else in the crowd. This easily feels like something that would have been coming out 10 years later. This is very much a book that is ahead of its time, and at the same time, it's very simple. It's the story of this guy. His dad is a superhero, was a superhero, and he does not have any interest in being a superhero, and yet the role is kind of thrust upon him. And it feels very natural. It feels very real. Jack Knight does not feel like an artificial character. His disdain for the life of a superhero, it feels pretty organic, and at the same time, him deciding to take on this role whenever he needs to, that also feels organic. It doesn't feel false when this guy who really loathes the identity of Starman suddenly becomes Starman. That doesn't really feel forced or anything like that. You would think that it would, but it doesn't the way that they handle it, and it really works here. Also, what I really love about this book is the character of the city. Far too often in series like Firefly, you will hear people say that the ship itself is its own character in the series. And usually that sounds really pretentious and stupid. In this case, Opal City, it has an identity of its own. It feels very different from cities like Metropolis or Gotham or Keystone City. It feels different. And part of that is they will give you a little bit of a history of the city, but also you're seeing this city through the eye of Jack Knight, who is a very different character than Batman or Superman or the Flash. And so I think because of that, you're getting a look at this city that feels very different. And I really like Opal City. It's probably my second favorite thing about this book, my favorite thing being Jack Knight himself. But overall, I don't want to talk too much about this book because I really want people to read this series. And if you're interested in this series, you don't have to worry about getting the flimsy trade paperback. This is probably from the mid-90s, shortly after the series started. You can buy Omnibuy. Within the last 4 or 5 years or so, DC has put out several omnibuses, Omnibuy, whatever, of this entire series. So if you're interested in James Robinson and Tony Harris's Starman, then I would recommend checking out the Omnibuy, which I don't have. I've always wanted to read this entire series. This is all that I've read from Starman, but I've always wanted to read more. I just haven't gotten around to it because that's a lot of money to put down. But from what I'm aware of, if the rest of the series is anything like Sins of the Father, then it's definitely worth your penny. So if you're interested in the series, I would recommend checking out those omnibuses, Omnibuy, however you say it. In the meantime, that's all that I have to say about Starman, Sins of the Father. So I hope you guys will check this series out, and I hope you guys will be back for day 5 tomorrow, where I will be talking about another DC Comics Earth 2 Justice Society type series. What will it be? Who knows? In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of your day. Catch you later.